Somewhere in a frozen forest outside Bastogne, Belgium, in the winter of 1944, an American paratrooper shot a German officer off his horse. And the first thing he did, before checking for maps or intelligence or anything that might actually help win the war, was search the body for a pistol. Not just any pistol, a Luger. He found one, tucked it into his coat pocket, and told everyone in his company about it. A few hours later, the pistol discharged through his clothing and severed his femoral artery. He bled to death in the snow, surrounded by men who could not stop the bleeding fast enough. A soldier who had survived D-Day, Operation Market Garden, and weeks of artillery bombardment in the Ardennes, killed by the souvenir he wanted more than anything else in the war. What nobody knew at the time was that this kind of story had been repeating itself across 2 world wars, on every front, in every theater. The Luger P08 was not just a sidearm. It was the most obsessed over, most stolen, most dangerous trophy in modern military history. And the story of how it got that way starts not on a battlefield, but in a Berlin workshop at the close of the 19th century, where a quiet engineer was staring at someone else's ugly, brilliant mistake and thinking about how to fix it. Georg Luger was an Austrian-born engineer working in Berlin at the end of the 1800s, employed by a German arms company called WWII and Company. His job was to demonstrate and sell firearms to foreign militaries, which meant he spent a lot of time watching soldiers handle guns, and more importantly, watching them struggle with guns. One weapon in particular caught his attention. It was the Borchardt C93, a semi-automatic pistol designed by Hugo Borchardt. On paper, the C93 was impressive. It was one of the first commercially produced semi-automatic handguns in the world, powered by a unique toggle lock mechanism that used a jointed arm to chamber and eject rounds. Instead of a slide moving backward, like on a modern pistol, 2 hinged arms would buckle upward at the joint, pull the spent casing out, and then snap back flat to push a fresh round into the chamber. It was genuinely inventive. The problem was everything else about it. The Borchardt was enormous. It had a bulky rear overhang housing the recoil spring, a grip that felt awkward in the hand, and a profile that looked more like a small rifle than something an officer would carry on his hip. When Georg Luger brought the Borchardt to the United States Army for evaluation in 1894, the Americans rejected it. Too heavy, too clumsy, too expensive. But they gave him something more valuable than a contract. They gave him a detailed list of everything that needed to change. Georg Luger took notes on every complaint the army had and went back to Berlin with an idea. Hugo Borchardt refused to change his design. He saw nothing wrong with it. So Luger decided to do it himself. He kept the one thing about the Borchardt that actually worked brilliantly, the toggle lock action, and redesigned everything around it. He shortened the frame. He angled the grip forward to 55.5 degrees, so it pointed naturally when you raised your arm, almost like pointing your finger at a target. He relocated the recoil spring into the rear of the grip, eliminating that bulky rear overhang entirely. He improved the extractor, redesigned the safety mechanism, trimmed the barrel down to 4 inches, and produced the whole thing in a smaller, sleeker package. The result was a handgun that felt like an extension of your hand. When you picked it up, the barrel pointed exactly where your finger pointed. The balance was perfect. The trigger pull was crisp. It was, by every measure, a work of mechanical art sitting in the palm of your hand. Georg Luger filed his first patent in Britain in 1900, and the pistol that would eventually carry his name was born. But making a beautiful pistol was only half the story. The other half was the bullet it fired. The original Luger was chambered in 7.65mm Parabellum, a small, fast cartridge that worked well enough for target shooting and officer use. But when the German Imperial Navy came calling in 1902, they wanted something with more stopping power, something that could put a man down in a boarding action at close quarters on the steel deck of a warship. So Georg Luger went back to his workshop and did something that would change firearms forever. He took the 7.65mm case, shortened and widened it, and created a brand new cartridge. He called it the 9x19mm Parabellum. The name came from the Latin phrase Si vis pacem, Parabellum, which translates to, "If you want peace, prepare for war." It was the company motto of DWM, the arms manufacturer that had absorbed WWII and become Luger's employer. That 9mm round was designed specifically for this one pistol, for this one navy, in this one moment. And over a century later, it is the single most widely used handgun cartridge on Earth. Every modern military sidearm, every police service weapon, every concealed carry pistol chambered in 9mm traces its ammunition directly back to Georg Luger and the German Navy's request in 1902. The German Navy adopted the Luger in 1904. The German Army followed in 1908, and that adoption date gave the pistol its official military designation, the Pistole 1908, or P08. From that moment, the Luger was the standard sidearm of the most formidable military force in Europe, and the world was about to find out what it could do. The first real test came in the trenches of World War I. The P08 was issued to officers, non-commissioned officers, machine gun crews, messengers, and signal troops across the German army on the Western Front. In the mud and chaos of trench warfare, the Luger earned a complicated reputation. On one hand, it was accurate, fast to fire, and comfortable to hold, qualities that mattered enormously when a soldier was fighting at close range during a nighttime trench raid with nothing but a pistol and a sharpened shovel. The toggle lock action cycled quickly, and the recoil was manageable, even during rapid fire. On the other hand, the same precision engineering that made it such a pleasure to shoot also made it vulnerable. The toggle mechanism had tight tolerances. Mud, dirt, and the wet filth of the trenches could jam it in ways that a cruder, more loosely fitted pistol might shrug off. It was a weapon built for clean conditions, performing in the filthiest war the world had ever seen. Germany recognized the problem and developed a specialized variant called the Langpistole 08, or the artillery Luger. This version had a nearly 8-inch barrel, an adjustable rear sight, and could be fitted with a detachable wooden shoulder stock that turned it into something close to a short carbine. Most importantly, it could accept a 32-round drum magazine called the Trommel magazine, giving a soldier more firepower than any standard pistol of the era. The artillery Luger saw extensive use in the trenches, especially with stormtroopers conducting assault operations where a compact, high-capacity weapon was essential. But none of these tactical details mattered to the soldiers on the other side of no man's land. For American, British, and French troops, the Luger was something else entirely. It was the trophy. Soldiers who had never held a semi-automatic pistol in their lives saw the Luger and recognized it instantly, not as a military tool but as a prize. That distinctive silhouette, the long barrel, the toggle mechanism rising and falling on top of the receiver, the elegant forward rake of the grip, nothing else looked like it. American doughboys arriving in France in 1917 started hunting for Lugers almost immediately. They pulled them off dead German soldiers, bargained for them with prisoners, and took enormous risks to acquire them. The obsession was so widespread that it became part of the culture of the American Expeditionary Forces. A soldier who came home with a Luger had proof he had been in the fight. It meant you had gotten close enough to a German soldier to take something off his body. It meant you had been in the thick of it. Fathers showed them to their sons. Veterans brought them to American Legion meetings. Some were displayed in glass cases. Others were wrapped in oilcloth and tucked into attic trunks where they sat for decades. The Luger was more than a weapon. It was a story you could hold in your hand. And the fact that getting one usually meant putting yourself in danger only made the story better. But here is the detail that everyone missed at the time. While American soldiers were risking their lives to grab Lugers off the battlefield, Georg Luger himself had already tried to sell the pistol to the United States Army. It happened years earlier, in 1907, when the Army was searching for a new standard-issue sidearm. They had decided the next service pistol needed to fire a .45 caliber round, after their .38 caliber revolvers proved unable to stop Moro warriors during the Philippine insurrection. Georg Luger submitted 2 prototype pistols chambered in .45 ACP for the Army's trials at Springfield Armory. These were not ordinary pistols. They were hand-built, one-of-a-kind precision instruments with slightly modified grip angles, produced at the DWM factory in Germany under Luger's personal supervision. During the first round of testing, the Luger actually performed well, firing over 1,000 rounds with only a few stoppages. The army was interested. They asked DWM to supply 200 more for extended trials, and then DWM refused. The exact reason has been debated by historians for over a century. Some believe DWM had already committed to a production contract with the German military and could not justify setting up a separate manufacturing line in .45 caliber for a foreign army. Others think Luger simply calculated that a foreign design would never beat two American competitors, Colt and Savage, on their home turf. Whatever the reason, DWM withdrew from the competition. The army went with John Browning's Colt design, and the world got the M1911. Those two .45 caliber Luger prototypes became some of the rarest handguns on the planet. One of them sold at auction in 1989 for $1 million. When it came up again in 2010, it brought just under $500,000. The other prototype has never been located. In the 1987 film Wall Street, Gordon Gekko brags about owning one, calling it the rarest pistol in the world. He got some of the details wrong, but the mystique was real. The Luger was already a legend, and it had barely gotten started. By the time World War II broke out in 1939, the Luger P08 had been in continuous military service for over 3 decades. Germany had lost the First World War and signed the Treaty of Versailles, which imposed severe restrictions on its military, including limits on weapons production. But the Luger never disappeared. Production was moved, scaled down, and sometimes disguised, with some pistols even being manufactured by Vickers in England, using German-supplied parts and shipped to the Netherlands East Indies. During the Weimar Republic years, the Luger stayed in the hands of police forces and what remained of the German military. When Hitler came to power and began rearming in earnest, the Luger was waiting. It stepped right back into its role as the standard German officer's sidearm, as if nothing had changed. It was issued primarily to officers and specialized troops in the Wehrmacht, the Kriegsmarine, and the Luftwaffe. The quality of construction was so high that many P08s originally manufactured during World War I were still fully functional decades later and were simply reissued to second-line troops in World War II. But Germany had a problem. The same craftsmanship that made the Luger legendary also made it a nightmare to produce in wartime quantities. Each pistol required extensive precision machining and careful hand-fitting of components. The production cost was $19.80 per unit, which does not sound like much until you realize Germany needed hundreds of thousands of sidearms, and every dollar and every hour of factory labor counted in a war economy running on borrowed time. So, in 1938, Germany selected a replacement. The Walther P08 was simpler to manufacture, cheaper at $14.08 per unit, and used roughly half the production time. But switching over took longer than anyone expected, and Luger production continued at the Mauser factory in Oberndorf until 1942. Mauser alone produced over 900,000 Lugers, and the total number built across all manufacturers over the weapon's entire production run exceeded 3 million pistols. So even though the Walther P08 was the official replacement, millions of Lugers were still being carried in holsters across every front when the war ended in 1945. And that meant the trophy hunting obsession from World War I came roaring back, except this time it was bigger, stranger, and far more deadly. American GIs arriving in Europe quickly learned what their fathers and grandfathers had known a generation earlier. The Luger was the prize. Ask any World War II veteran of the European theater what the most coveted war souvenir was, and the answer was always the same. Stars and Stripes cartoonist Bill Mauldin captured the phenomenon perfectly in one of his most famous wartime cartoons. He drew 2 German prisoners of war sitting together, and one of them is telling the other, Luger. $100, camera. $150, Iron Cross, $12. It is good to be captured by Americans. That was barely an exaggeration. Soldiers traded, bargained, gambled, and flat-out stole to get their hands on a Luger. Men who had fought side by side would fall into bitter arguments over who had dibs on one pulled from a captured German officer. It was irrational, it was widespread, and it was completely real. The demand created an informal economy that followed American troops from the beaches of Normandy all the way into the heart of Germany. At the liberation of Berchtesgaden, Hitler's mountain retreat in the Bavarian Alps, GIs discovered a bonanza of Luger pistols and were photographed inspecting piles of them on tables like kids in a candy store. Rank and priority meant nothing. Privates and generals alike wanted one. The Luger had become the ultimate proof that you had been there and had seen the war up close. But the Germans figured out how to weaponize that obsession. Intelligence reports from 1945, including a specific warning published in the February edition of the U.S. Intelligence Bulletin, described German troops deliberately leaving Lugers behind in obvious locations with concealed explosive charges wired to the trigger mechanism or the toggle action. The concept was simple and brutal. An American soldier sees a Luger lying on a table in an abandoned farmhouse or tucked into the belt of a dead officer on the roadside. He reaches for it, and the hidden charge detonates. The bulletin specifically warned Allied soldiers about charges concealed inside rifles and Luger pistols that the enemy planned to leave behind. The Luger's own desirability had been turned into a weapon. There were also persistent stories, never conclusively confirmed, that German soldiers would execute any American prisoner caught carrying a Luger, treating it as proof that the soldier had killed a German officer to take it. Whether or not that was true in every case, the belief was widespread enough that some GIs hid their captured Lugers rather than carry them openly. The most famous Luger story from the war entered popular culture decades later through the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which depicted the men of Easy Company, 101st Airborne Division. The show portrayed Corporal Donald Hubler as a soldier consumed by the desire to find a Luger. Through multiple episodes, Hubler talks about wanting one. Finally, in the episode called The Breaking Point, set during the Battle of the Bulge, he shoots a German officer and finds a Luger on the body. He is ecstatic. He tucks it into his coat pocket, and then the pistol goes off, severing his femoral artery. He bleeds out in the frozen woods outside the village of Foy, while his friends try desperately to save him. The real story was slightly different. In reality, the weapon that killed Hubler was probably not a Luger at all, but a Belgian-made .32 caliber pistol, and the gun discharged when it snagged on barbed wire, not from the weight of his clothing pressing against the trigger, but the show chose to make it a Luger because the symbolic weight was irresistible. The pistol that every soldier wanted became the pistol that killed a man who finally got one. That story captured something deeply true about the Luger, even if the specific details were dramatized. The show also featured another telling Luger moment in its final episode, when Major Dick Winters accepts the surrender of a German officer who offers him an ornate pistol. The real Winters kept the pistol and showed it in a documentary interview years later. He noted that when he examined it, it had never been fired. The officer had carried it through the entire war without pulling the trigger once, and then handed it to the man who defeated him. Moments like that explain why the Luger carried weight that no other sidearm in the war could match. After Germany surrendered in May 1945, thousands of captured Lugers flooded into the hands of Allied soldiers heading home. GIs packed them into duffel bags and mailed them in boxes. British soldiers tucked them into kit bags. Canadian troops carried them across the Atlantic. The Soviets reportedly captured around 8,000 Lugers and stored them in military warehouses, where they sat untouched and were never issued to troops. The Swiss, who had been the very first country to adopt the Luger way back in 1900, quietly dropped it from service in the late 1940s. The pistol's era as a frontline military weapon was finished, but the Luger's influence was just getting started in ways that had nothing to do with the pistol itself. That 9x19mm Parabellum cartridge, Georg Luger, invented in 1902 for the German Navy, outlived every army that ever carried the gun. After World War I, the 9mm spread across Europe as militaries recognized its effectiveness. After World War II, it spread across the world. NATO standardized on it. Police forces adopted it on every continent. Civilian shooters embraced it for its balance of power and controllability. Today, the 9mm Parabellum is the default handgun caliber for virtually every military and law enforcement organization on the planet. When someone walks into a gun store and asks for a box of 9mm, they are buying a cartridge that was engineered in a Berlin workshop at the turn of the 20th century by an Austrian engineer whose name is stamped on every pistol he ever made. Georg Luger died in Berlin in 1923 at the age of 74, decades before his pistol reached the height of its infamy in World War II. He lived long enough to see it become the standard sidearm of the German Empire, the weapon of the Great War, and the foundation of a cartridge that was already spreading across the world. He did not live long enough to see what came next. He never saw it become the most hunted war trophy in history. He never saw the booby traps, the black market, or the soldiers who died trying to take one home. He saw a mechanical problem, and he solved it with an elegance that no one has ever quite replicated. The decades after the war only deepened the legend. Veterans who brought Lugers home kept them in closets, gun safes, and shoe boxes, and the stories they told their children and grandchildren about how they got them became family heirlooms in their own right. As those veterans aged, many of those pistols entered the collector market, and the prices reflected the mythology surrounding them. A standard wartime P08, in good condition with matching serial numbers, sells today for somewhere between $1,000 and $2,300. Original holsters, spare magazines, and documented provenance push the price higher. Rare variants made by Krieghoff or early DWM production runs can reach $4,000 or more. And then there are the extreme outliers, the kind of Lugers that show up at major auction houses and make headlines, like that .45 caliber prototype with a price tag that could buy a house. For collectors, the Luger is not just a firearm, it is a puzzle. Every marking, every proof stamp, every serial number tells a story about when and where it was made, which military unit carried it, and sometimes which battle it survived. Matching all the numbers, confirming the originality of every single component, and tracing the chain of ownership back through 8 decades of history is part of what keeps collectors coming back. The Luger rewards patience and obsession, which is fitting because obsession is exactly what created its legend in the first place. A mismatched Luger, one where parts from different pistols have been swapped over the years, might sell for under $1,000, but a fully matching, all-original example from a known manufacturer with its wartime holster and toolkit intact can bring 2 or 3 times that. The market is ruthless about originality because collectors know that the story matters as much as the steel. A Luger with paperwork showing it was brought home by a specific soldier from a specific unit carries a premium that goes far beyond the metal and wood. The pistol's mechanical design itself has left fingerprints across more than a century of firearms engineering. That toggle lock action, the way 2 jointed arms rise into an inverted V and snap back down with each shot, is visually unlike anything else in the world of handguns. You can spot a Luger being fired from across a room just by watching the top of the receiver move. No slide racking backward like every other semi-automatic. Just that distinctive mechanical ballet on top of the frame. It is part of what made the Luger so instantly recognizable on screen, in photographs, and in the hands of soldiers on both sides of 2 wars. The Luger has appeared in so many films, television shows, and video games that its silhouette is burned into the collective imagination of people who have never held a real firearm. It is the pistol that villains wave in World War II movies. It is the weapon tucked into the belt of every Hollywood Gestapo officer. It showed up in Indiana Jones, in Quentin Tarantino films, in Call of Duty, and in dozens of other games where its toggle action and profile make it instantly identifiable. The Luger crossed over from military history into mythology, and it did it without a marketing department or a brand deal. just a shape that nobody could forget. The Luger P08 was manufactured for roughly 4 decades, served in the armed forces of at least a dozen countries, introduced the single most popular handgun cartridge in history, survived 2 world wars, and today sits in private collections and museum display cases around the world, worth anywhere from a few $100s to $500,000. It was too expensive to mass produce, too finicky for trench mud, and too complicated for wartime manufacturing at scale. Germany replaced it. The Swiss dropped it. Production ended over 80 years ago, and yet it became the most famous pistol on earth. Not because it was the best tool for the job, because it was the one thing every soldier wanted, and the one thing most of them could never get. That kind of desire does not come from a spec sheet. It comes from the way a weapon looks in your hand, the way it feels when you raise it and point it, and the stories that follow it across oceans and generations. The Luger earned every one of those stories the hard way, in mud, in snow, in the pockets of men who wanted it badly enough to die for it. What endures is not the pistol itself, but what it proved about the strange intersection of beauty, engineering, and human want. Build something that feels perfect in the hand, and people will chase it forever. If this story gripped you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one. Drop a comment below and tell us what other legendary weapons you want us to cover.